Morning, everyone. Please note that keep your microphone on mute unless there's something that you want to participate in the class as well, so that there's not going to be a back and forth when it comes to the pictures as well. So please make sure that you keep your microphone on mute. Please make sure that you keep your microphone on mute. I see that there is a gentleman by Victor. Please make sure that you keep your microphone on mute as well. And everyone else, please make sure that you keep your microphone on mute so that the pictures won't go back and forth when we're conducting the class as well. So my name is Reynolds Musha, and this is my name at Senem. That's my cell phone number. And this is our website address, but I'll also share it as well on the different WhatsApp groups as well. Please make sure that you put your microphones on mute. Please make sure that you put your microphones on mute. So what we do is that we are a private institution that offers tutorial classes to students, and we also offer classes for students who are studying Rsk4803, 04, and 05 as well. So please make sure that you put your microphones on mute. Then on our side, we have already done the induction class previously. Our first class was an induction class, and I've shared the link to the video that we have made publicly available to everyone on the different WhatsApp groups as well. Please, if you don't have it, when it comes to the induction class, please, if you don't have the video, please let me know if you're not able to attend as well. But I'll also make sure that I share that video on our website as well. So what we do is that we are going to assist you to go through the different we're going to go ask you to go to the study units. We assist you with the guidelines on the assignments, and then we also assist you with the revision as well. So all this information I've already discussed it in the induction video, because the induction video is very useful because it shows you exactly what you should expect when it comes to Rsk4803. When it comes to the study units, everything that you should expect until you write your exams in February. That's basically what we discussed in the induction video as well. So please make sure that you go over the induction video so that you're able to know exactly how we conduct the classes, what our schedule looks like. Everything is also discussed in the induction video. If you don't have the link to the induction video, then let me know so that I'm also going to be able to share that link to the induction video as well. So our agenda today is to go through study unit 1 and see how far we can go through study unit 2 as well. So today our agenda is to now start the curriculum basically. So what we have done is that for the month of March, we are offering free classes so that you are able to make up your mind on whether you want to enroll with us or you want to continue on your own or with other institutions as well. You're free to do that. So what we do is that for the month of March, since the registration is still ongoing on the UNISA side as well, we have decided that we're going to be conducting free classes. And for those free classes, well, we basically showing you exactly how we conduct the classes. You have a view of how we conduct the classes, what we cover, and how we go through the curriculum as well, so that you're able to make up your mind on whether you want to enroll with us. And if you want to enroll with us as well, I'll also share that information on different WhatsApp groups after the class as well. Because so far, what I've shared is basically the information that you need for you to be able to attend the classes. But please go over the induction video, because the induction video that we did, it basically covers quite a lot of information, because we spent about 1.5 hours giving you an in-depth analysis of the module, of how we conduct the classes, or how to access our website, how to register with us, how to basically do everything, and what to expect as well between now until you write your exams in February next year. The induction class basically covered all that. So to avoid repeating ourselves, we would encourage you to have a look at the induction video so that you are able to see exactly how we conduct our classes as well. So looking at study unit 1. So remember we said that in the previous class, for Rsk4803, they're going to be looking at 6 topics that you're going to be looking at. So there are 6 topics, and under those 6 topics, there's going to be different study units that needs to be covered as well. So looking at study unit 1, if you check in the study guide, if you look at study unit 1 falls under topic 1, which looks at risk management. So it's basically an introduction to risk management. And under topic 1, it covers study unit 1, 2, and 3 as well. So study unit 1 basically looks at lessons not learned as well, right? So when you look at lessons not learned, in this case, What we also mentioned in the previous class as well, excuse me, what we also mentioned in the previous class was that when it comes to third unit one, we are basically trying to, they are basically trying to show you exactly the lessons not learned when it, from a risk management perspective, so that you're able to understand exactly, so what is it that, what are the mistakes that other financial institutions made that also brought their downfall as well. And of interest that we're going to briefly discuss later on in the study units as well. I think it's going to be study unit 2 when we start study unit 2, where they mention something relevant to that as well, is where we look at the case of what happened with the bank of the bank SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, that is in the US as well. We're going to discuss that briefly, although to see exactly how it's related to risk management as well. So study unit 1, unit 1.1, unit 1.1 basically looks at the case study of ESCOM. So please take note that when it comes to the exam, how the lecturer generally gives you the questions in the exam is that they give you a case study, and then from the case study, you are expected to show your application knowledge when it comes to risk financing, right? So you're expected to show your application knowledge when it comes to risk financing. So because of this, you'll see that yes, they do cover the different case studies of ESCOM. You see on study unit 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4 as well, and 1.5 as well. They cover these different case studies as well. So for exam purposes, I wouldn't expect them to be asking you anything in detail that has been mentioned in the articles when it comes to the case studies. Because remember, when you look at these case studies, like for example, the case of ESCOM, they're looking at the financial statements, they're looking at a lot of things as well. Yes, from an application perspective, yes, you do need to know it. But for the case of for the sake of the exam as well, I wouldn't really expect them to be giving an in-depth analysis to say, when it comes to this particular article, can you analyze it and do this, and that as well? I wouldn't really, so far, they've never really done that, mainly because when it comes to case studies, they give you the case study of the exam, and then based on the information of the case study, they ask you questions as well, so that you're able to show your application knowledge for risk management as well. So because of this, well, I would encourage you to go over the articles for Unit 1.1 on your own. I would encourage you to go through the articles for Unit 1.1 on your own, where you look at the case study of ESCOM. And please take note, it's quite a lot of articles that they expect you to go through. But remember, it's for you to understand risk financing from risk management from an application purposes, from an application perspective, where they're saying in real life, this is basically how you apply risk management. But when it comes to the preparing for the exam, I wouldn't really expect them to be going so much in depth when it comes to Unit 1.1. And because of this, go over this for you to be able to know the cases where risk management has failed and all those other scenarios as well. But don't spend too much of your time going through Unit 1.1 to Unit 1.4, mainly because we wouldn't really expect much to be asked when it comes to those. Because remember, like what I said, when it comes to the exam, they give you the case study, and based on the case study, they'll ask you questions as well. So Unit 1.1, yes, go through it for you to know information from a risk management perspective, from application in real life perspective, but don't spend too much of your time going through that material as well. Then Unit 1.2, like we mentioned in the previous class as well, Unit 1.2 looks at the case of Barings Bank, where Barings Bank, where they look at the case of they're basically analyzing what really brought down Barings Bank, and they are focusing their attention on what Nick Leeson as well. So you can go through that so that you're able to know that from an application perspective exactly. So in which where is it that we can say risk management failed, and what are the issues that they also encountered that also resulted in risk management failures as well when it comes to Barings Bank. Then 1.3, they also look at HIH collapse as well. And remember, this was basically an insurer was basically in Australia as well. And there was the case of the board overstating information and not necessarily being truthful and honest when it comes to presentation of their information as well. So yes, from an application perspective, where we're saying that in real life perspective, this is basically what you need to know in real life, but when it comes to preparation for the exam, we are not going to spend so much of our time going through this, mainly because I don't see how they would bring such a question in the exam. But for you to be able to just have a general knowledge of exactly applicability of risk management failures as well, you can go through study unit 1.3. But don't spend too much of your time going through unit 1.3. Yes, go over the information so that you're able to understand exactly what happened, so that you're able to apply it in real life perspective. But when it comes to preparation for the exam, don't spend too much of your time, although you do need to know it from a risk management perspective as well. Then there's also unit 1.4, where we look at the case study of COM-A as well. Yes, you do need to go through it, but you need to know it from a risk management perspective, like what I said previously when it comes to the other previous case studies as well. But when it comes to the exam, I wouldn't really expect them to go in depth and ask you about COM-A and the case study and everything like that as well. Because remember what I said, from a risk management perspective, if they give you a case study, they'll give you that particular case study, and then from that information, they'll ask you to apply information that you've learned from a risk management perspective as well. So that's basically unit 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4, right? Now, after unit 1.1 to 1.4, there is also unit 1.5. For unit 1.5, it's basically in two parts. So unit 1.5 is basically in two parts. The first part of unit 1.5, they are basically looking at more in depth when it comes to the case study of LTCM as well, right? And what really brought its failures as well. But over and above that as well, they now start looking at risk metrics and risk management failures as well. So this section, we are going to go through it with you, mainly because although when you look at the previous exam, the lecturer has not really brought such questions, this section in the previous exam, but there is a chance that it can be examinable as well, or there's information that you might also be able to use when you're also looking at applicability in other study units as well. And because of this, for unit 1.5, when it comes to the second part, where you look at risk metrics and risk management failures as well, we're going to go through that section together in class so that you're able to understand the different risk metrics and also the risk management failures and what are they and what causes them as well. So that's basically what we're going to be looking at when it comes to unit 1.5. So unit 1.5, they refer us to the article risk management failures. What are they and when do they happen? And specifically for unit 1.5, they refer us to the case study of LTCM as well, right? So looking at this particular case study, you see that so although I already covered this in the previous study unit as well, and on the video I also gave it, those students who were also enrolling after the first class as well, we also gave the opportunity to be able to create a user account on our website where they were able to download the different articles on our website as well. Because remember, what we have done as well is that we have created, we have basically consolidated the different articles from study unit 1 all the way to study unit 23. We've highlighted them and put a bit of notes on those articles as well. So it would be useful for you to be able to try to streamline the information, because remember, because there's no specific textbook for Rsk4803, you'll see that there is quite a lot of articles that you're expected to go through. And since there's quite a lot of articles that you're expected to go through as well, we see that we have managed to streamline those articles based on the learning outcomes. So based on the learning outcomes, so when we're preparing the notes on those articles, we looked at the learning outcomes and then we said, how are the learning outcomes, how are the questions on the learning outcomes answered in the article as well. So now, based on this, we're now highlighting the different sections in the articles there based on the learning outcomes, so that we're able to now focus on the point that the lecturer is trying to put across when it comes to a particular article. Otherwise, you see that some articles, they end up going on a tangent from the point that the lecturer is trying to put across as well. And because remember, the article has got its own agenda of exactly the point that he wants to put across, and the lecturer will be having his own agenda on the point that they want to put across as well. And because of this, you will see that we try to link the learning outcomes to the different articles. That's basically how we highlighted and put a bit of notes on the different articles as well. So it will help you streamline the information that you're going to go into in the article, so that you're able to work through the articles faster as well, so that you don't end up spending so much of your time on things that are not necessarily expected as learning outcomes in the study guide. So looking at unit 1.5, under self-assessment, they say, argue the case that LTCM demise was caused by risk management failure. Compare the roles and responsibilities of risk management and top executive management. Discuss the types of risk management failures, and discuss the alternatives that enterprises can consider to prepare for future crises as well. So these are the self-assessment outcomes that are expected to know. So which means that when we're preparing the when we highlight the different articles as well, we highlight the different articles based on the self-assessment questions there as well. So looking at this, now when you look at the article, remember those students who already created their user account as well, we also gave you a link to the Google Drive, and on the Google Drive, there is basically different articles that are covered from the start unit 1 all the way to start unit 23. And remember, what we've also done is that we have given limited access to the articles as well, so that you're able to access those articles for free as well. So once you create a user account, you will be able to access those articles for free, mainly because until the 31st of March, we are basically giving free classes for Rsk4803. We are also giving free access to our website as well, so that you're able to access the videos of what was done last year, so that you're also able to access the videos of what we're going to, all of the class that we're going to be doing then. And then you're also able to access the videos of some of the study units that we covered. I think from our website, what we've done is that we have made available the videos covering study unit 1, study unit 2, and also study unit 3 as well. So we've made available the videos covering those 3 study units as well. So would encourage you to create a user account. And when you create a user account, notify us via WhatsApp that you have created a user account. This is your email, and this is the modules that you want to be linked on our website, so that we give you free access. But we'll also encourage you to officially register with us before the 31st of March, because from the 1st of April onwards, those who are not officially registered with us, we're going to be cutting off their access, and we're also going to be cutting off their access as well. So which means that they are not going to be able to access videos of other study units going forward, and they'll not be able to access the website as well. So I encourage you before the 31st of March to officially register with us. But between now until the 31st of March, you are able to create a user account, notify us that you've created a user account, you want to be linked on the website, then we'll freely link you, so that you're able to access the videos and some of the material that is available on the website as well, so that you're able to use it as we are, because we acknowledge that from the UNISA side, they are still going through registration process as well. So because the registration has been extended, we are offering this for free for students as well until the 31st of March. So please utilize that our window period for you to be able to see exactly, to go through more of our material, so that you're able to see if it works for you, so that you're also able to cover more study units as well. Then also utilize this as well to be able to access some of the articles as well, so that you don't have to worry about consolidating all the articles yourself. The articles are already consolidated for you. So looking at the article for unit 1.5, they look at risk management failures. What are they and when do they happen? And remember, we're looking at the case study of LTCM. So looking at the case study, they say this article does not examine the subprime financial crisis or problems of financial institutions during the crisis directly. Rather, it is an attempt to make sure that if risk management is blamed, it is for the right reasons. Then they also say, I therefore show when bad outcomes can be blamed on risk management and when they cannot. In the process of doing so, I provide a typology of risk management failures as well. Then they also they gave us information on the case study of LTCM as well. Remember, the case study itself, yes, we're just going to go through it briefly, but it's just for you to go through it as a lead on to the next section that is of importance that we're going to be looking at as well. So it's just to give us a brief background of exactly that is going to lead us on to the point that we want to drive through when it comes to risk management failures. So here they say, was the collapse of long-term capital management a risk management failure? Remember, LTCM is basically acronym for long-term capital management, which is basically was a hedge fund as well in this case. So they say, before its collapse, LTCM had capital close to 5 billion, assets in excess of 1 billion, of 100 billion, and derivatives for notional amount in excess of 1 trillion. By mid-September, LTCM's capital had fallen by more than 3.5 billion, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York coordinated a rescue by private financial institutions that injected 3.65 billion in the fund. So does a loss of more than 80% of more than 70% of capital represent a risk management failure? Does a loss that requires a rescue by banks involving an injection of 3.65 billion of new capital show that risk management failures are failed? So it turns out that it is not easy to answer this question. So to determine a risk management failure, one must first determine the role of risk management. So in a typical firm, the role of risk management is first to assess the risks faced by the firm, communicate these risks to those who make taking decisions for the firm, and finally, manage and monitor those risks to make sure that the firm only bears the risks its management and board of directors want to bear. So which means, looking at this, we're basically saying that as a risk manager, sorry. Oh, sorry. So what we're saying is that as a risk manager, right, your job is to identify those risks that are being faced by the firm, quantify those risks, and then present those risks to the board, isn't it? You need to present those risks to the board, right? So the board is the one that's going to be making the decision to say, based on the different risk exposures, this is basically our desired risk exposure as well. Because remember, the board is the one that's going to be making that decision to say, so how much risk exposure are we going to be seeking as well? Because remember, we know that in general term, high risk, high expected return. So in pursuit of expected return, how much risk exposures are we willing to expose ourselves? So that decision is basically going to be put on the feet of the board, because the board is the one that's going to be making that decision to say, so do you want overall the company to have a conservative risk rating, a moderate risk rating, or aggressive risk rating when it comes to the investments that we're going to be pursuing as well, or our investments that are going to be pursuing and their risk exposures as well. Then after that, after the board makes the decision on exactly how much risk they are willing for the firm or for the company to be able to expose themselves to, you as the risk manager now, it's your job to ensure that you monitor and review your risk exposure, so that all the activities of the organization as well are going to be falling within the desired risk exposures that has been set forth by the board. So that's basically what they're trying to put across on this particular point as well. So which means here they say, because firms are generally more concerned about unexpected losses, a frequently used risk measure is value at risk, which is also given as VAR, a measure of downside risk. So value at risk is the maximum loss at a given confidence level over a given period of time. So you're basically saying that at a given confidence level, how much is the maximum loss we're expecting to suffer as an organization over a given period of time? So that's basically what value at risk basically indicates as well. So you're looking at what? The maximum loss that you're expecting to suffer over a given period of time as well on a given confidence level. So say, are we 95% confident? Are we 99% confident? Or are we 98% confident as well that this is the maximum loss that we're expecting to suffer? So which means based on this, they say this measure might be estimated daily or over longer periods of time as well. So that's basically what the value at risk measure. So when it comes to the actual calculation of value at risk, we don't worry about the actual calculation of value at risk for Rsk4803. We will look at calculation of value at risk at Rsk4805. So when we do Rsk4805, I think it's study unit, it's chapter 12 of the textbook. That's when we're going to be looking at the actual calculation of value at risk and expected shortfall as a measure of risk as well. So when it comes to Rsk4803, just know exactly what value at risk is, but you're not going to worry about the actual calculation. They'll never really ask you about the actual calculation of value at risk in that case. So which means when you look at the case study of LTCM, right? When they did their calculation of value at risk, right? They saw that using the value at risk, they had worked out that 99% of the time they would earn an average return of about 25%. So they'd done their calculations, and using the value at risk, they determined that 99% of the time they would earn an average rate of return of about what? 25%. So which means that this explained in years, it meant that in 99 years, the return, and they would earn that return over a period of what? 99 years. So they're expecting that over, for example, a period of 99 years, if you look at it in years, in the number of years as well, they were expecting that over a period of 99 years, they would expect to earn a 25% return consistently, a minimum of 25% return consistently over a 99-year period as well. And then, so which means that of the 100 years, 99 years of those 100 years, they're expecting to earn a 25% return. Then a 1 year, and 1 year, a loss that is in excess of what? 20%. So which means over 1 year of the 100 years, that's when they would expect to only suffer a loss in excess of what? Of 20% as well. So that's basically what their model, when it comes to the value at risk model, what it indicated to them as well. Now, they also said as well, so deciding whether to take a non-risk is not a decision for risk managers. So the decision depends on the risk appetite of an institution. However, defining the risk appetite is a decision for the board and top management. So that decision is at the heart of the firm's strategy and of how it creates value for its shareholders as well. Then they also say, in this case, for instance, we have to scale back so which means that in this case, when a company is facing financial problems as well, it basically means that if a financial institution makes a large loss, the institution may, for instance, have to scale back its investments because of being financially constrained, have to sell assets in unfavorable markets, lose valuable employees who become concerned for their bonuses, lose customers who are concerned about the institution being distracted or not having sufficient resources to help them, and face increased scrutiny from regulators as well. So those are some of the consequences when a financial institution suffers large losses as well, like what we saw in the case of SVB Bank as well. Then looking at this as well, going back to the case study of LTCM, they say, so when they suffered large losses, they say at the end of 1997, LTCM had a capital of 7.4 billion, but decided to return roughly 36% of the capital to its investors. So with less capital, LTCM could still execute the same trades. However, now to implement them, it had to borrow more and hence had to increase its leverage. So when they talk about leverage, this is basically the use of debt financing. So leverage basically means use of debt financing. So they are basically saying that they decided to pay back some of the capital to their investors, and for them to maintain their positions as well, they decided to borrow more money. So which basically means that when you look at the debt to equity ratio, the debt in relation to the equity of the institution in this case had what? Had increased because they were using what? More leverage to finance their operations as well. Then they say by increasing its leverage, it could boost the return to its shareholders if things went well, at the expense of making more losses if things went poorly. So was increasing leverage a poor risk management decision? So which means in this case, we look at whether it was a poor risk management decision as well. So there they say, in summary, risk management does not prevent losses. So with good risk management, large losses can occur when those making the risk-taking decisions conclude that taking large, well-understood risks creates value for the organization as well. So looking at this, right, the part of this case study that we're more concerned with is not necessarily the case study of LTCM. We're more concerned with the typology of risk management failures as well, because this is basically what I was saying, that yes, in the previous years, they have not necessarily asked questions when it comes to risk management, when it comes to unit 1, but we need to go through this particular section so that we're able to know and understand exactly, in case they ask something from the perspective of risk management failures, we should be able to answer the question as well. So looking at this, when you look at the typology of risk management failures, they say 2 types of mistakes can be made in risk measuring, in measuring risk. Non-risks can be mismeasured and some risks can be ignored. So either because they are known or viewed as not material. So once risks are measured, they have to be communicated to the firm's leadership. So a failure in communicating risk to management is a risk management failure as well. So after management decides what kind of risk to take, risk management has to make sure that the firm takes these risks. So in other words, risk managers must then manage the firm risks, a task that may involve identifying appropriate risk mitigating actions, hedging some risks, and rejecting some proposed trades or projects as well. Because remember, we need to make sure that whatever projects that the organization is going to be pursuing as well is going to be within the desired risk limits of the organization as well. So with this perspective, there are 6 types of risk management failures. So please take note of this as possible theory questions that you can be asked in the exam. So here they say there are 6 types of risk management failures. So which means in this case, when you look at the 6 types of risk management failures, the first one is mismeasurement of known risks. And the second one is failure to take risks into account. And the third one is failure in communicating the risks to top management. And the fourth one is failure to monitor risks. And then the fifth one is failure in managing risks. And then the sixth one is failure to use appropriate risk metrics as well. So now, looking at the first one, which is mismeasurement of known risks as well, they say risk managers could make a mistake in assessing.
Sorry, Ryan.
Yes, is there a question?
Yes, are we allowed to ask questions?
Yes, you can ask. Yes, you can ask.
I'm looking at the article provided by the UNISA on the My UNISA. And on that article, they are talking about 5 types of risk management failures. And then you have indicated 6. Is the article that you use in the one that has been provided for the module on the website?
Let me just have a look, because
okay, maybe what we can do, you can check the ones that you have, and then I can check this. I can just check this one and we see which one is missing.
All right, because I know that for this particular article, there are two. Is it the one that is written? Yes, yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to jump in and say on the one that we have, they combined monitoring and managing it to one.
Yeah, see, though I know, I'm sure the article that you are referring to is the one that is bluish in color. Is it this one here? Is it this one?
I think that is the one. I think that is the one.
Yes, yes. It's basically this. It's basically the same thing. It's basically the same thing. That's why I didn't. You see, that's why I didn't even highlight this one as well. It's basically the same thing, because you can go through this one or you can go through the other one as well. It's basically the same information that they're giving.
Okay, thank you. You can
All right.
continue.
Okay. So looking at the article, so remember we said the first risk management failure is mismeasurement of known risks as well, right? So when you look at mismeasurement of known risks, they say, okay, just give me a second. Just want to check if there's a question. Okay. Please ensure that where you are seated, you have a good network connection. Please make sure that where you are seated, you have a good network connection. Because remember, especially these days, although on my side, we are not going to be having load shedding the rest of the day, maybe on your side, you might be having load shedding as well. So please make sure that we have a good network connection, and your network is also good as well, where you are going to be sitting when you're having classes as well. So please make sure that you check your network connection. So when you see that, maybe sometimes the picture gets a bit smaller, or sometimes you might be hearing the voices that are dragging as well, is mainly because the person that is participating on the other side is basically having a poor network connection as well. So please make sure that you check the network connection where you're seated as well. All right, so continuing. So here they say, when it comes to mismeasurement of known risks, they say risk managers could make a mistake in assessing the probability of a large loss or the size of a large loss if it occurs. However, in addition, they could use the wrong distribution altogether as well. So they could use the wrong distribution in analyzing exactly what the probability of the loss would be when it comes to the distribution of the losses as well, whether they're going to be not using binomial distribution in estimating the distribution of the losses, or they're going to be using a normal distribution as well in estimating the distribution of the losses as well. So because of this, it basically means that if you use the wrong distribution, it basically means that your estimation of exactly how much your losses are going to be skewed towards, whether they're basically skewed on the middle or on a certain average amount, or they're going to be skewed to the left or to skewed to the right as well, is going to be also wrong as well. And this also results in what? Mismeasurement of what? Of the risk as well, because you're not going to be able to get your estimate of exactly what the risk amount would be is going to be wrong, mainly because you're using the wrong distribution and the wrong model in estimating those losses as well. So here they say, a simple way to put this is that correlations may be mismeasured. So correlations are extremely important in risk management because the benefit of diversification falls as correlations increase as well. So when you look at the issue of correlation, we basically say the correlation coefficient between two assets. So the correlation coefficient between two assets varies between -1, 0, and +1. So which means when you look at the correlation coefficient, when securities are having a risk, when you look at, for example, returns, and when you look at if the returns of two securities are having a correlation of +1, it basically means that they are moving in the same direction. When the return of security X goes up, we're also expecting the return of security Y to go up. And when the returns of security X goes down, we're also expecting the return of security Y to go down as well. So which basically means that in this case, when there's a correlation of +1, we say the two securities are perfectly positively correlated. So they are perfectly positively correlated. In the case of, let's say, for example, if it's going to be the performance of the returns of the securities over time, or when you look at the performance of the returns of the securities over time, we're basically saying that if security M have returns that are moving in this direction, we're also expecting security N to have returns of securities that are moving in this direction as well. So what does that mean? It means when M goes up, we're also expecting N to go up. And when M goes down, we're expecting N to go down as well. So here, it basically means that you are having a very high risk exposure, because in your portfolio, if it's made up of two securities and they have the same correlation coefficient, which is a +1, it basically means that when your portfolio is having a downward returns in your securities as well, you're expecting the whole portfolio to be what? Having losses. Because when M is having losses, N is also having losses as well. So because of this, it basically means that when your correlation coefficient is +1, you are basically having what? A high risk exposure when it comes to correlation coefficient as well. Then when your correlation coefficient is 0, we say there is no linear correlation. So it basically means that the performance of the securities there, they are not necessarily moving in the same direction. There's basically a random relationship between the securities. So there's no specific relation that you're able to deduce from the performance of the two securities as well. Then there is also a correlation coefficient which is -1. And when the correlation coefficient is -1, we say it's perfectly negatively correlated. So we say the securities are perfectly negatively correlated, which means when you look at the returns of the two securities over time, we're basically saying, for example, if you look at the return of the two securities M and N, we're saying if M is moving in this direction, N would be moving in the opposite direction like this, where when M is having an upward trend, N is having a downward trend. And when M is having a downward trend, N is having an upward trend. So it's moving, they're basically moving in opposite directions like this as well. So this is basically where we say the correlation of the two securities are perfectly negatively correlated. So now, what this means is that when the correlation coefficients of two securities are perfectly negatively correlated, we're basically saying the return or the average return is going to be found somewhere in between there. So that the returns are basically netting off each other, and the average return is going to be found somewhere in between there as well. Which basically means that in this case, this is where we say when your correlation coefficient is perfectly negatively correlated, we say there is high degree of diversification. So there's a high degree of diversification in your portfolio, mainly because we're basically saying that if one is performing well, the other, and even if the other one performs does not perform well as well, the good performance of this one is going to carry the bad performance of the other one. And when one starts going up as well, the good performance of that one is also going to carry the bad performance of the other one as well. Which basically means that your portfolios are basically what? Carrying each other, which means that your returns are going to be netting off in a region that is what? Relatively positive as well. So which means when it comes to portfolios as well, we're basically saying that you are going to be seeking to have a portfolio with a correlation coefficient which is closest to what? -1 as much as possible. So the closer the correlation coefficient is to -1, the more diversified your portfolio is, which also means the more you go in this particular direction, so the more you go in this particular direction as well, the risk is what? Reducing. So the more you go in this particular direction, the risk, your risk exposure is expected to be reducing as well. Are we on the same page when it comes to the issue of correlations and how they affect risk? Can we move on? All right, moving on to the next point, or on the next section. So they say with the LTCM example, it could be that the true probability of loss of 70% was higher than 1%, say 25% as well. So which means that the true probability of 70% was higher than what 1%, or which in this case it was not just 1% that they were saying that we're expecting to suffer losses of 1% of the time. It was actually what 25% of the time as well, which means that they basically mismeasured their risk exposure. And because they mismeasured their risk exposure, they were expecting that in 99% of the time, we're going to be having a positive return of 25%. In actual fact, they basically mismeasured the risk. It was actually what? In less percent of the time as well. Then they also say, when an institution has many positions or projects, the risk of the institution depends on how the risks of the different positions or projects are related. So if the correlation between the positions or projects is high, it is more likely that all the firm's activities perform poorly at the same time, which leads to a higher probability of a large loss. So these correlations can be difficult to assess, and they change over time, at times abruptly as well. And remember, that's basically what we're trying to put across when it comes to the issue of correlations there as well. So here they say, so in this case, risk managers could not be expected to know what correlations will be, but their assessment of the risk of a portfolio or the firm would depend on their estimates of the distribution of the correlations. So in this case, it would be possible to realize correlations to be different from their expected value, and yet there would be no risk management failure as well. So here they say, historical data is at times of little use because a known risk has not manifested itself in the past. For instance, with the subprime crisis, there was no historical data of a downturn in the real estate market during which a large amount of securitized subprime mortgages was outstanding. So in such a situation, risk measurement cannot be done by simply using historical data, since there is a risk of a decrease in real estate prices that has not manifested itself in a comparable historical period. So here they are looking at the case of the 2008 financial crisis as well, where we saw that when you look at the 2008 financial crisis, there was no subprime crisis that has happened before. When you look at the historical recession that resulted from that basically manifested as well, because the previous one as well, I think it was the dot-com crash that happened in around 2000, and during that period, it was basically coming from the IT side as well. So because of this, because there's no historical data, it basically means that, remember, when you're looking at measurement of all these risks using models as well, you need to be able to measure these risks as well using what? Historical data. So which means that if you don't have historical data, you don't have a starting point for you to be able to measure these risk exposures as well. And because of this, even if you try to use hypothetical information, it basically means that you are running the risk that you are still going to have a mismeasurement of the risks as well, mainly because there is no historical data. And sometimes there's no historical data that you can also use as a starting point for you to be able to measure the probability of the risk happening as well. So here they also say there is a fundamental problem with the performance of risk measurement when assessments become subjective. Suppose that all parties agree that an established statistical model works well. So in this case, they're saying, in addition, then a risk manager establishes the question and questions the reliability of the statistical model used by experts in the field concerned as well. So this is where sometimes you find that in an organization, they remember when you look at who comes about with the different models, economists are the ones who develop these models, and then risk managers and financial managers and other people within the organization are the ones who are going to be using these models as well and trying to apply them as well to measure risk, for example, from a risk management perspective. So sometimes you might have a situation where the risk manager might have questions on the reliability of the model, because remember, the risk manager is not going to be involved in deciding on in saying this is how they in basically coming up with a particular model as well, right? So the economists are the ones that come up with these models as well. So which basically means that sometimes if the risk manager now starts questioning the models that they've been given for them to be able to utilize to measure risk as well, when they start questioning that as well, they're basically saying that sometimes you might end up having a redundancy in responding to a problem, mainly because the time that you're spending arguing and putting across your arguments on the reliability of a particular model, so time is moving, decisions are not being made as well. And sometimes you find that, especially the type of environment that we are in currently as well, you also find that things are moving very fast. 1 minute you hear that there's new information coming in, next minute, after a day, there's already new information in the market. And after a week, you hear that there's something new in the market, and you always have to filter in all this information that is coming in the market as well. And we also see that because we're now living in a global economy as well, you also find that we are constantly being bombarded by information. Like what we see last weekend, we're talking about SVB Bank and the failures of the American banks as well. And it basically means that if you are trying to take into account effects on your risk exposure as well, it basically means that you also need to take into account exactly what these new developments. Although they're happening across the world there, it is also things that are also going to might end up affecting you as an organization as well. And because of this, it basically means that you are constantly facing new information. So sometimes when you're given a particular model, you start arguing on the reliability of the model, even if you are wrong or you're right as well, you will also find that it also slows down the decision making, which means that the organization is not going to be agile enough and adaptive enough to be able to respond to the problem at hand as well. So here they say, as risk management moves away from established quantitative models, it becomes easily embroiled in intra-firm politics. And so at that point, the outcome for the firm depends much more on the firm's risk appetite and on its culture than on its risk management model as well. So which means that the outcome of exactly what they decide to do when it comes to the organization is now going to end up being a subjective decision instead of being an objective decision as well. Are there any questions before we look at mismeasurement due to ignored risks? Any questions? So when you look at mismeasurement due to ignored risks, they say ignored risks can take 3 different forms that have different implications for a firm. First, a firm may ignore a risk even though the risk is known. And second, somebody in the firm knows about the risk, but the risk is not captured by the risk models. And third, there is a realization of a truly unknown risk in that case. So in this case, when you look at the first one, which looks at ignored known risks, they say A good example of this possibility is as follows. Before Russia defaulted on the domestic debt in August 1998, many hedge funds took positions where they bought high-yielding Russian debt, hedged the debt against the default risk, and finally hedged the debt against exchange rate risk. So it was easy to believe that the resulting position had no risk. However, to hedge the currency risk, the funds had to sell rubles forward against what? Against the dollar in that case as well. So which means in this case, they say, even though it wouldn't have been made much difference as the Russian banks still went down down, you find that LTCM didn't even take the step to try to hedge the risks as well. Although in this case, they're looking at what the case where they could have taken the position what to hedge the exchange risk as well. And we're basically saying that even though we're looking at ignored non-risk as well, they're basically saying that LTCM as well, they also knew the risk factors, but at the same time, they decided not to take a hedging position against what these risks as well. On the next section, we look at mistakes in information collection, and they say, if some risks are not accounted for when risk is measured for a firm, the risks left out are not adequately monitored, and they can become large because organizations have a tendency to expand unmonitored risks. For instance, consider a trader whose risks are only partly monitored. Typically, traders have a compensation formula that involves an option payoff. They receive a significant share of the profits they generate, but they do not have to give back the losses. So if only some of the risks of a trader are monitored, he can increase his expected compensation by increasing the risks that are not monitored without suffering any of the consequences. So which means in this case, they're basically saying that when it comes to the risks that the trader can make as well, you can have a situation where there is going to be risks that the trader is going to be monitored on, and then there's also risks that the trader is not going to be monitored on as well. So which basically means that those risks that the trader is not going to be monitored on as well, they are also going to end up overweighting their portfolios on the risks that what they're not being monitored on. And because of this, it basically means that the organization ends up having a higher risk exposure, but at the same time, there's not going to be any monitoring on those risks that they are taking, mainly because what there's no mechanism that they've put in place what to monitor those what risk exposures as well. Which basically means that at the end of the day, if the risks pay up, if the risk taking pays off, the trader knows that they are going to be paid in bonuses as well. But at the same time, if the risks do not pay off as well, they are not going to be, it's not going to be affecting what their bonuses. Although we know that they also, when it comes to portfolio management, they also use what they call high watermarks as well to try to make sure that the traders do not take reckless risk-taking positions as well. So here they say, accounting for all the risks in risk measurement is a difficult and costly task. However, not performing that task for an organization means that the firm's top executives are managing the company with blinders on. They see only part of the big picture. They have to understand to manage effectively as well. Now, looking at unknown risks, they say other unknown risks may not matter simply because they have a trivially low probability. There is some probability that a building will be hit by an asteroid. This risk does not affect any management decisions. So ignoring the risk has no implications for risk management. So because of this, they have to conclude that they do not capture all risks in their models, and therefore some capital has to be made available to cope with unknown risks as well. And remember, that's why you see that especially in the case of banks as well, there is always an incentive for them to be able to leave out as much capital as possible, because the higher the amount of capital they leave out within the bank as a cushion, the more they are going to be able to cater for the unknown risks as well. Are there any questions so far? We also look at communication failures. And when you look at communication failures, they say risk management is not an activity undertaken by risk managers for risk managers. Rather, it is an activity undertaken to enable the firm to maximize shareholder value by taking optimal decisions across the firm. So therefore, risk management has to provide timely information to the board and top management that enables them to make decisions concerning the firm's risks and to factor the firm's risk in their decision. So in order for the board and the top management to understand the risk situation of the firm, this situation has to be communicated to them in a way they can understand properly, which means in this case, they're basically saying that since you as the risk manager, your job is not to make the decision on exactly how much is the desired risk exposure of the organization, or how much the risk appetite of the organization should be. It basically means that the risk management failures can also come about because of what? Communication failures. Mainly because if you as the risk manager, remember we said that your job is to identify and quantify the risks. And then when you do that, you need to present the risk to the what? To the board of directors. And the board of directors are the ones that are going to be making that decision to say, based on the information that we have, then this is basically the desired what? Risk exposure that we seek for the organization to have as well. Which means that if the risk exposures are not properly communicated in a way that the board is able to understand, it also means that it's going to end up resulting in what? Risk management failures in that case. Then there is also failures in monitoring and managing risks. And in this case, they say risk management is responsible for making sure that the firm takes the risks that it wants to take and not others. So as a result, risk managers must constantly monitor the risk that the firm is taking. Further, they have to hedge and mitigate known risks to meet the objectives of top management. So for the typical non-financial firm, risks often change slowly. So not so for financial firms. For a financial firm, risks can change sharply even if the firm does not take new positions. So the problem arises from the fact that financial firms have many derivative positions and positions with embedded derivatives. So over time, these positions have become more complex as well. And remember, this is one of the issues that we also came across when you look at the financial crisis in 2008, where when you look at financial firms and non-financial firms, non-financial firms are typically firms that are not in the financial industry. Like, for example, you are looking at firms in manufacturing, you're looking at firms in different sectors as well. So which means that when it comes to these particular firms, when it comes to their risk management activities, we are not expecting that much movement when it comes to their risk exposures. But when it comes to financial firms, it basically means that we also expect that there's going to be quite a lot of movements when it comes to their risk exposures, especially where they're going to be looking at what use of derivatives. Because remember, when you look at derivatives, you are basically packaging things that are also having underlying securities, where the performance of this asset or this derivative is going to be based on what's happening with the underlying security, which means that if the trader or the organization does not understand the workings of the underlying security, it basically means that there is going to be quite a lot of problems that they're going to be having in what? Managing the risk exposures as well. So because of this, it basically means that financial firms have to make sure that they are constantly monitoring and managing their risk exposure compared to non-financial firms as well. So here they say, When the risk characteristics of the securities can change very rapidly, it is challenging for risk monitors to capture these changes and for risk managers to adjust hedges appropriately. So this challenge is especially great when risk characteristics can change dramatically for small changes in the determinants of security prices. So as a result, risk managers may fail to adequately measure risks or hedge risks simply because risk characteristics of securities may change too quickly to enable these managers to assess these characteristics properly or to put on correct hedges as well. So in large complex organizations, it is also possible for individuals to take risks that remain hidden for a while. So a trader might have constructed a complicated position that only he understands. So this position might be such that under some circumstances, it could lead to large losses. So the position might use securities that are not incorporated in the risk management systems as well, which means that in that case, it basically means that the risk management system is not going to be able to monitor and manage those risks, mainly because it's not within the parameters of the risk management system. So here they say the effectiveness of risk monitoring and control depends crucially on an institution's culture and incentives. So if risk is everybody's business in an organization, it is harder for pockets of risk to be left unobserved. So if employees' compensation is affected by how they take risks, they will take risk more judiciously. So the best risk models in a firm with poor culture and poor incentives will be much less effective than in a firm where the incentives for employees are better aligned with the risk-taking objectives of the firm. So risk measure of the firm. Then we also look at risk measures and risk management failures as well. And here they say, so far, we have taken the risk matrix as given. We now show the focus on metrics that are too narrowly, too narrow, make it harder for management to achieve its objectives. Specifically, risks that the management would consider important can be left unmeasured and ignored. So a widely used risk metric in financial institutions is the daily value at risk measure for trading activities as well. So focusing on the daily market value at risk, though intellectually satisfying for risk managers, because the most up-to-date quantitative techniques can be brought to bear on the problem, can only be part of the risk management and not one of the top management should focus on. So top management has to focus on longer run implications of risk. So which basically means that they're basically saying that top management should be focusing more on risk management in the effects in the long run. Then the other managers can also now look at managing risk on a what? On an operational level, like on a day-to-day case as well. So there has to be sharing of risk management activities on different levels, depending on exactly how much in focusing, how much further in focusing one needs to be. So top management needs to be looking at the long-term implications. Then the other managers now have to be concerned with what? The operational level, especially when it comes to managing the risk management activities of their different sections of the organization, like for example, the sales department, the operations department, the manufacturing department, the other departments as well. So here they say, daily value at risk measures assume that assets can be sold quickly or hedged so that a firm can limit its losses essentially within a day. However, both in 1998 and over the last year, we have seen that markets can become suddenly less liquid so that daily value at risk measures lose their meaning. So if a firm sits on a portfolio that cannot be traded, a daily value at risk measure is not a measure of the risk of the portfolio because the firm is stuck with portfolio for a much longer period of time. So this is usually what materializes when you look at what we saw during the 2008 financial crisis, where when you look at the 2008 financial crisis, one of the main issues that many organizations were having is that they were stuck with illiquidity position, where they were now having these securities that were no longer able to actually dispose of in the market, mainly because of no one is, remember, for every seller there has to be a buyer, right? So because the buyers are now very skeptical of exactly what's happening in the market as well, you are sitting in a situation where you are now stuck with securities where there's no buyer in the market as well. And because of that, what happens? Because of loss of confidence in the market, because of demand and supply, what is going to happen? This is what one of the situations that will give rise to what huge losses as well, mainly because there's no buyer in the market because of what lack of liquidity as well. So which basically means that when you look at the value at risk, you are basically saying that they are basically saying that you're assuming that you're able to sell your securities quickly, but in actual fact, when the market is also facing illiquidity, it basically means that the value at risk measure is not going to be reliable as a measure of risk, mainly because there is no quick selling or turning off of what? Of the securities, so because of lack of liquidity. So that was the conclusion to the 6 causes of market failure. So that was the conclusion, or that was the conclusion when it comes to the 6 causes of market failures. Remember, on unit 1.5, they did give us information regarding LTCM, but I don't want you to dwell too much of your time going through the case study and knowing in detail the case study of LTCM. What I wanted you to take note of from unit 1.5 is basically that section where we look at the 6 types of risk management failures. So this is basically what you need to make sure that you take note of. When it comes to unit 1.5, the most important thing that you need to take note from there is the 6 types of risk management failures. So is there any question when it comes to the 6 types of risk management failures? And remember, how it's different from the previous, from the other article is that failure in monitoring and failure in managing risk as well. That even in this case study as well, they basically looked at it as one. Are there any questions? So please take note. Historically, study unit 1, they have not really brought in questions coming from study unit 1. So from study unit 1.1 all the way to unit 1.6, historically, they have not brought in questions coming from this study units. But the reason why we're covering study unit 1.5 is mainly because if they are to bring in something coming from study unit 1, they are more likely to ask you questions regarding the risk management failures. Because remember, this is basically very, very important, because even if you look at it as well from a practical perspective, when we look at different organizations as well, one of the reasons why they also fail is mainly because they are failing in the risk management activities as well. So that's why, even though it has not been brought in previously, when it comes to the different over the different years, remember they changed from 2017 onwards. That's when they brought in the new curriculum, and because of this, it basically means that from 2017 onwards, you see that they have never really brought in questions coming from study unit 1. But in case they bring them, please take note of unit 1.5. And what you need to take note of from unit 1.5, don't worry much about LTCM. Yes, it's leading you on to the main point that they want to drive on study unit 1.5. But the main point that they want to drive on study unit 1.5 is the 6 types of risk management failures. That's what you need to make sure that you dwell your mind on more. So are there any questions on what we have covered from study unit 1.5? Any questions? All right. Can we check it?
Hello.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello. Yes, I'm asking if do you do face-to-face tutorials or only via Zoom?
Currently, we are only having classes via Zoom because we cater for quite a wide range of students as well, not only around Joburg, but we offer because we offer classes to a wide range of students across the country and other countries as well. We mostly because we used to offer one-on-one classes, but that was before the pandemic. But when we went into the pandemic, we were forced to change into online classes. So we are still assessing whether it would be viable for us to go back to one-on-one classes.
Okay, any specific times? Because most of us, we are working during the week, or it's only take place over the weekends?
All right, you see that for our classes, we already have a timetable. I will share the timetable. For now, what I wanted to do was just to share information on the online class, the free online class.
Yes.
What I'm going to do now is that on the WhatsApp, different WhatsApp groups as well, I'm going to share our timetable because we already have a timetable between now until end of October. So you'll be knowing exactly on this day, this is what we're going to be having a class, and we're going to be having a class from what time to what time as well. So there's and because remember, between now until end of October, that's when we should be done with the study units. Then November, December, January, until you write in February, we concentrate that time on revision, where we go through past papers, assignments, and also for the past papers, we'll be going through the question papers, and we already have the memos as well. And there's also videos of the other years going back to 2018, where there's also videos going through those different papers as well. So that's basically what we'll be doing. So when it comes to the schedule, there's already a schedule that has been put in place to go to the study units between now until end of October. So the schedule is already there. I'll share the link of the timetable, but you see that generally our classes are every second week, and each class is 3 hours. So it's every second week, but we also need to take into account the issue of holidays and all those things. That's why you see that we have to make sure that you check on your timetable to see exactly when are we having classes. Like now, as we go through April, there's going to be that period of Easter holidays as well. We have to take that into account. So it's already accounted for when we prepared the calendar for the year.
Okay, so lastly, will you be able to share the fees, or once I've registered with you, is then that?
All right, what we do is that I'll also share another link as well. And on the link, you will see the fees. It will give you the fees depending, and it will also give you the different payment terms. But generally, we give you a payment term where you're able to, if you start in March, whatever you do, we just have to make sure that by what? End of December this year, 31st of December, your fees are fully paid off. So you can choose to pay whichever way you break down the fees. And the fee for the year is 2,750 per module, and it covers going through the study units, it covers the assistance with assignments, it covers revision, and also accessing our database of the videos from the previous years as well. Everything is included there.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions?
You indicated that is 2,750 per module, which then calculates to around 270 per month. So if I'm able to pay for the 1 month, does it mean then you are going to lock me out, or I still have a chance to pay?
We are very flexible, right? So we are very flexible, and we've always been flexible. But what we encourage you to do is, if on a given month, if you're not able to make your monthly installment, you just have to communicate with the admin and you tell them, this is my situation, I'm not able to pay my fee for the month. Then they'll be, usually they always give you that grace as well, as long as you're able to ensure that you make up for it as you go forward as well. So the most important thing is that you're able to communicate with our admin, and I'll also share with you the email for the admin as well. I'll share that on the different groups. Are there any other questions?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Yes.
Yes. What I wanted to ask is the 6 types of risk management failures. Are we going to apply the same types for different scenarios?
Yes, it will depend on exactly what scenario they give you. In the in the case of the exam, if they give you as a case study. Is that the question?
Yes, what I wanted to know is, is it going to be the same but just different scenarios, but you're going to use the same topics under the 6 type of
Yes. So if on a given case study, if you're going to be using the ones that you deem to be relevant depending on the case study, because remember, you just need to make sure that you know what the different types of risk management failures are. If the moment you're able to know them and understand exactly what they are, it basically means that you should be able to identify them in the given case study. And remember, it's not all the time that the risk management failures are going to be emanating from the as the same causes of a failure for a different organization as well. It will depend on exactly how are they relevant for different organizations as well. Because remember, different organizations, the risk management failures are going to be emanating not necessarily from all the 6 risk management failures. Some of them are going to be emanating from 1 or 2 or 4, whatever number of risk management failures. So you need to be able to identify the ones that are relevant in that case. But remember, that's why I keep going back to the point where I say in the exam, they will give you a case study. And then based on the case study, you now are expected to answer and apply the knowledge that you've had. So which means you need to be able to identify the risk management failures and say, okay, from the 6 risk management failures, these are the ones that are relevant to this particular case, and I'm going to be, these are the ones that are, if they are asked, then it means that you should be able to discuss them relevant and link them to the what? To the case study that is given as well. Are we together?
Yes, thank you so much.
So it's not all the time that all the 6 are going to be relevant for one case to another case to another case to another case as well. It's not always going to be all the 6 of them are going to be relevant. Are there any other questions? All right, can we take a few minutes break? I see that it's 9:34. Can we take a few minutes break until 9:45? So we usually take a 10 minutes break in between the class. So can we take a 10 minutes break until 9:45? Then at 9:45, we look at unit 1.6. So can we take a few minutes break until 9:45? Then at 9:45, we look at unit 1.6. Can we continue?
Yes, you can continue.
So on the next section, we are now looking at unit 1.6, right? So from an exam perspective, from 2017 until now, the lecturer has never really asked any questions coming from study unit 1. So we have not seen any questions so far coming from unit 1.6. Although you, in a way, you can also try to link it with unit 2 as well. And I'll also highlight when we go through study unit 2, I'll also highlight where unit 1.6 would fit in to a question that will be dealing with sections unit from coming from unit 2, because you will see that unit 2 is a very, very important unit, because historically there's been quite a number of questions that have been asked relating to unit 2 in the previous exams. So you'll see that study unit 2, we have seen quite a bit of questions coming from study unit 2 as well. And if you look at the Jan Feb 2023 paper, there is some questions that I think that were coming from study unit 2 as well. And I'll just highlight them when we go through study unit 2, because I think the Jan Feb, the lecturer asked quite all the questions that the lecturer asked, is things that they had previously asked in past assignments or past papers as well. So looking at unit 1.6, remember I said historically there's not been a question that has been asked in the past papers relating to unit 1.6, but it's one of those sections that if in the future the lecturer decides to ask questions from unit 1.6, there is material that can be asked from unit 1.6 as well. And because of this, that's why we need to cover unit 1.6 and in that case. So unit 1.6, if you check in the study guide, for unit 1.6, we look at what a difference a word makes, understanding the threats to performance in a VUCA world. And the article that they ask us to look at is what a difference a word makes, understanding the threats to performance in a VUCA world as well. So that's the article that we are expected to go through. Then under self-assessment, they say, explain the acronym VUCA and illustrate with examples from your own experience, and discuss the complexity in the context of this article and draw a comparison with the 7 billion write-down in Woolworths with their subsidiary in Australia. Although the second part of this, I wouldn't really expect it to be something that would be coming from that they would bring in the exam as well. So the most important thing that we need to take note from unit 1.6 there is being able to explain the acronym for VUCA as well. So which means from unit 1.6, we need to know what VUCA is, and for each VUCA, for each letter on the VUCA acronym as well, we need to know exactly identify the problem, how to identify the problem, and how to be able to solve the potential problem that will be coming from each of the letters from the VUCA acronym as well. So looking at this, going back to unit 1.6, they say, so if you check on the second page of the article, which is section 1 of the article, which looks at living in a VUCA world, on the paragraph to the right, they say, of course, optimists see the edge of a company can gain if its leaders master the accompanying challenges. For example, volatility provides profit opportunity, uncertainty is opportunity, simplifying IT complexity is a major opportunity, and ambiguity equals opportunity as well. So which means when you look at the acronym for VUCA, they're basically saying that the acronym for VUCA represents, so this is the acronym VUCA, and the acronym for VUCA represents volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So this is very much relevant when you look at the type of economic environment that we are currently experiencing as well. Mainly because when you look at how the economies were previously, if you look at it historically, right, you will see that historically the economies where if you're running your own, let's say for example, you're running your own supermarket, you would find that you're running, let's say you're running a supermarket in the, you're running a supermarket in a small town, right? You're running a supermarket in, let's say you're running a supermarket in Queenstown, you would find that historically, the only risk exposures that you were more concerned with is basically the risk exposures of what is happening around your area where you're operating a supermarket. Let's say it's in Queenstown, right? Which basically means that you are more worried about what is happening to my competitors. You know that the only options that your customers are likely to have is for them to be able to buy from your supermarket, which also means that you're not worried about the competition that you're going to be exposed to from people from other towns, from people from across the world, or from other suppliers across the country as well. So because of this, it basically means that when you look at a risk management and assessing your risk exposures as well, it basically meant that it was more simplified, which means that even if you look at the historical books as well, the historical books were able to actually, the models that were used historically, they were able to actually better assess your risk exposures as well. But now, we are now in an environment where even if you're a supplier in Queenstown, you're not only worried about your competitors around Queenstown as well. You're also worried about your competitors where now your customers are in a position where they can even order things online. They can order things online from Takealot. They can order things online from Amazon and get it delivered as well. They can order things online. Remember, you're looking at Amazon where it's basically international as well. They can order. There is also other suppliers that can also supply the goods that you are also offering as well. Which basically means that the level of, because of the advancements in IT, we see that it's also making consumers have more options. And it's also making consumers being able to exercise those options as well, which basically means that you are now in an environment where when you're making decisions now, when it comes to your organization, there is quite a lot of information that is now bombarding you constantly and affecting your decision making. So you're no longer just worried about what is happening in your small community, mainly because whatever is happening in the world at large is also going to end up affecting what your small community as well. We see exactly what is happening. Like, for example, when you look at the war in Ukraine, you see that there's also effects where they're basically saying that the wheat prices are expected to be increasing because we're in a global world as well. We are expecting shipment of wheat coming to African countries as well, which basically means that the price of wheat is going to go up. And when the price of wheat goes up, it also means the price of bread is also expected to go up. So there's always going to be a ripple effect where whatever is happening on the global stage is also going to end up affecting you as an organization as well. And because of that, it basically means that this is basically where the acronym VUCA comes in, where you are now basically saying that, so this acronym of VUCA is originated from American military strategies, where they are basically saying that in the middle of the battle, we are trying to in the middle of the battle where there's a lot of chaos of things, so many things happening around you as well, you're trying to make strategic decisions for the organization as well, for your military organization within the middle of that chaos as well. Mainly because even if you look at it from a perspective, like what I said, right now as an organization, constantly there's bombardment of new information. Every week there's always going to be new information or new news coming into that is going to be affecting your organization as well, which means that because of that constant bombardment of information, you are now expected to make decisions. So how do you ensure that your organization is able to keep up with all this ever-changing economic world that we are going to be operating in as well. So looking at this.
Sorry, sir.
Yes.
It is this reason why we see, in terms of repo effect, looks like the petrol is going up almost after 3 months. Electricity is going up. Food. It is this reason what of VUCA.
Yes, basically they are saying there is quite a lot of factors that you are now having to account for compared to previous, when you look at historic previous effects that would affect your organization previously as well. The reason being, let's look at if you look at the year, if you look at it from the year 1900, right? You were living in your own small community where the factors that were affecting the price of your goods and all those things were not necessarily getting supplies of goods from across the world. It's mostly getting supplies from your area around you as well, right? So because of this, it basically means that, but now when you look at your supply network as well, the supply network is basically increased. And it's basically becoming what? More interconnected. It's becoming a bit more complex when it comes to what really affects your goods and services as well. So that's basically why you find that sometimes where you find that this ripple effect is going to end up affecting what? The price of goods and services around you as well. Like what we saw where if you look at the case of petrol, when it comes to petrol and diesel as well, we see that sometimes the price goes down, sometimes the price goes up. So also, it's not only going to be with the effect of exchange rate. So you also have to take into account the effect of exchange rate in the prices, and you also have to take into account what the effect of what is happening that is also affecting the price of those goods and services as well. Like what we saw where the OPEC cartel can also decide to say, you know what, we are going to be cutting down on the supply of oil. And because of that, when they cut down the supply, what happens? Because of the force of demand and supply, you see that the price of oil is going to be going up. And we have no control over that. No matter what you try to do, we have no control over that as well. Even if you see what happened, was it last year, where the government tried to cushion the people by doing away with some of the factors or some of the pricing that affects the price of oil as well. It was basically temporary measures, but at the end of the day, there was no control that the government can have on the overall pricing of the oil as well. So which basically means that whatever is happening there is also going to end up having what? A ripple effect on the supply price of goods and services as well. And that's why you see that if you really look, as a typical example, check what the price of sunflower oil was 2-3 years ago, and what the price of sunflower oil is as well as we stand as well. And one of the reasons being what is happening when it comes to war in Ukraine as well, which has resulted in the prices of cooking oil basically, increasing quite significantly as well. So whatever is happening there, it also has a ripple effect on your organization. So which means that this bombardment with information, how do you now make strategic decisions for your organization so that you're able to survive? And remember, you also see that on what happened when you look at what happened when it comes to the pandemic as well, where if you are not going to be agile enough to actually filter in and make strategic decisions on the new information that was constantly happening, where there was just a lot of uncertainties on what's going to happen next when it comes to the pandemic, when you look at what happened around 2020, 2021 as well. So there was quite a lot of uncertainty. So how do you, as a risk manager now, make decisions in the middle of all that chaos? So that's basically what we look at when you look at the VUCA acronym. Are there any questions?
Thank you, sir.
All right. Are there any questions? So the main point that they're trying to put across here, when you look at the VUCA acronym, is that it also means that the economic models that were prepared by economists. Remember, we said economists are the ones who prepare these economic models that we use to make decisions, right? So you see that some of these economic models, the question now becomes, how relevant are they? Are they still when it comes to the ever-changing economic world that we're living in as well? Because we're now living in a VUCA world where there's constant bombardment of information. So now we need to check to see exactly, so how relevant are these models? So we will, yes, they're introducing us to this VUCA acronym now, but you will see that we will still go back to this situation when we look at, that's how I was saying that this study unit 1.6 is also very much related to what we're going to be looking at in study unit 2. Because when you look at study unit 2, the main agenda of what we're trying to address in study unit 2 is, so if we are now acknowledging that we are living in an ever-changing environment, where economic environment, where there's constant bombardment of information, how do you now ensure that if these exogenous shocks come in and affect your organization, how do you ensure that you're able to mitigate the effects of these negative events as well? But remember, it's not enough to just mitigate the effects of these negative events. You also need to ensure that you're able to create a competitive advantage for the organization. So how do we ensure that we're able to prepare ourselves in advance to say, if these exogenous shocks come in and affect our organization, how do we ensure that we mitigate them? But over and above that, how do we create a competitive advantage for the organization? Because remember, the more competitive advantage we're able to create for the organization, the more we're able to meet the goal of the firm. What is the goal of the firm? The goal of the firm is to maximize shareholders' wealth. And for us to be able to maximize shareholders' wealth, it basically means that in the short run, we need to maximize profitability so that in the long run, we're able to maximize what? The value of the firm as well, which is basically the goal of the firm. So which means at the end of the day, how do we ensure that our organization is agile enough to mitigate the effects of these exogenous shocks and at the same time create a competitive advantage where we are able to maximize the value of the firm in the midst of this chaos that we are living in as well in the economic environment. So unit 1.6 is basically forming some sort of background info, giving us introducing us to a concept which we're going to be looking at in detail when we look at study unit 6 as well. But at the end of the day, it's going back to the same principle that I've given you as a foundation to say, we're saying, how do we mitigate the effect of these events that are happening around us? And how do we ensure that we're able to create a competitive advantage for the organization so that in the long run, we're able to meet the goal of the firm? So which means whatever question you are given when it comes to risk financing, always go back to ask yourself, what is the goal of the firm? The goal of the firm is to maximize shareholders' wealth. So which means whatever scenario are given in a case study, you always have to ask yourself to say, so how do we ensure that we're able to maximize shareholders' wealth? Which basically means that you're now going to be using, that's why we say that some of the information from study unit 1.6, you can be able to refer to it when you're now answering questions that are also given or relevant to materials given in study unit 2 as well, mainly because the unit 1.6 is very much relevant to what we see when we look at the scenarios that are going to be given in study unit 2 as well. So going back to the acronym, remember we said the acronym VUCA basically represents volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity as well. So that's basically what this acronym represents. So based on this, we're basically saying that how do we ensure that as a risk manager, you are able to make strategic decisions given that the economic environment that you're going to be operating in is basically constantly being bombarded by these 4 conditions as well. Are there any questions before we go on with the article? Any questions? So going back to the article, they say 3 significant problems exist in how leaders have employed these terms. First, Their use has been cavalier. That is, VUCA has become a cute, trendy way of saying unpredictable change. Though the words do have related meanings, it's the difference among them that are most valuable for leaders to understand. And second, when pundits and leaders are sensitive to the differences in meaning, there is a lack of information regarding just what it is that leaders should do in order to confront one or another of these conditions. And finally, and likely because there is a dearth of actionable advice out there, too many leaders are confronting this VUCA world by simply throwing their hands. So which means in this case, they just basically give into the different conditions as well and see what happens next. So here they say, consider these three problems, and it is evident that the second and the third are not unavoidable consequences of the modern business world, but rather entirely avoidable outcomes of the first condition in that case. So here they say, in the paragraphs that follow, we begin by pointing out the differences between the terms volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Then we discuss how to identify VUCA situations in the organizational environment and distinguish exactly which type of unpredictability is being experienced. And finally, we discuss the ways leaders need to position their companies to address these singularly. Each requires something different from the company and the leadership as well. So what do these terms mean? And what do they mean to your company as well? So we start off with volatility there, right? So remember, I'm going to explain these terms. Then after explaining these terms, I'm going to go back to table 1 so that you're able to understand this in detail as well. So when you look at volatility, they say a volatile situation can be defined as one that is unstable or unpredictable. It does not necessarily involve complex structure. A critical lack of knowledge or a doubt about outcomes may result from key events as well. So which means in this case, when they talk about volatility, they say, you know something is coming, but don't know how quickly and the magnitude of which it will happen as well. So that's basically what you look at, or what they mean when they say the situation is what? Is volatile. So which means in this case, you don't know, you know that something is coming. When the situation is volatile, you know that something is going to happen, but what you don't know is exactly how quickly is this event going to happen, and exactly what is the extent of, if it's a damage, what is the extent of the damage that it's going to be causing as well. So which means in this case, they say, the secret to dealing with volatility, as with any component of VUCA, is understanding the opportunities and threats inherent in the situation as well. Then they also say, when volatile change is expected, the best way to prepare is to devote resources towards developing agility. So which means in this case, whenever you're facing a situation that is considered to be volatile, you need to ensure that your organization is basically what? Agile enough to be able to mitigate the effects of what? Of a volatile situation in that case. So which means in this case, the key to agility is reliable forecasting, which means for you, an organization to be agile enough, it basically means that you need to run different scenarios. And after running different scenarios, you're now going to be able to use forecasting as well. So which means that forecasting and scenario planning as well would be very, very important for you as an organization, for you to be able to mitigate a situation that is expected to be volatile. Mainly because if you're able to do that, it basically means that you're now going to be able to say, for example, if best case scenario, worst case scenario, or expected scenario as well, then you also run to see exactly what is our organization going to do if the best case scenario plays out. What is our organization is going to do if the worst case scenario plays out, and what is the organization going to do as well when the best case or unexpected scenario plays out in that case as well. So that's basically how we are going to be able to mitigate a situation that is considered to be volatile. For you to be able to understand this in detail as well, I'll go back to table 1 so that we look at it in detail to say, if this is the scenario that is considered to be volatile, what is an example of a situation that is considered to be volatile, and how would you mitigate such a scenario as well? I'll go back to it so that we look at it in detail as well. Then a situation can also be facing uncertainty, which is the second letter of the acronym VUCA. So when a situation is facing uncertainty, they say uncertainty is a term used to describe a situation characterized by a lack of knowledge, not as to cause and effect, but rather pertaining to whether a certain event is significant enough to constitute a meaningful cause. So uncertainty is not volatility. A volatile situation is one in which change is likely, but that change may come quickly at varying magnitudes. An uncertain situation, on the other hand, is not so volatile. In fact, there may be no change. Inherent in it at all. So because uncertainty exists in the lack of adequate information, addressing it simply involves obtaining information. So investment here entails methods of collecting, interpreting, and sharing information. So uncertainty can be solved structurally by devoting more resources to boundary spanning activities, moving beyond existing networks, data sources, and analysis processes to gather information from new partners and look at it differently. Information networks are created from many different sources, both inside and outside the firm. So the principle is well illustrated by the aftermath of the 2001 financial terror attacks as well. So which means in this case, when you're looking at a situation where you're facing uncertainty, it basically means that you don't know if something is going to happen or not. Remember we said when the situation is complex, you know that something is coming, but you don't know the magnitude of how it's going to affect you as well, right? So which means when a situation is uncertain, it basically means that you don't know if something is going to happen or not. The best way to deal with such is gathering information as much as possible on a continuous basis and data processing as well. So which means in this case, when they give you the scenario, a scenario where of how organizations would deal with situations of uncertainty is where you look at the 2001 9/11 attacks as well, where after the 9/11 attacks, what America did is that you saw that the Western countries as well, they started increasing their sharing of information. So different organizations started sharing more information on exactly possible terror threats as well. So which basically means that that's basically how one can be able to deal with situations of uncertainty. You need to be able to gather as much information as possible. And from gathering the information that you have as possible, it basically means that you need to be able to process that data to see if it's if something is going to end up happening or not necessarily going to end up happening as well. For you to be able to make that decision as well, it basically means that the organizations need to on a continuous basis gather as much information as possible. That's why you see that at the end of the day, it's very, very difficult. This is where there's always going to be that thin line between trying to protect people's private information and also gathering people's information as well. That's why there's always going to be that fight between the state and the people as well, where the state would want to gather as much information as possible. And how are they able to do that? That's why you see that there's always going to be a friction between the different organizations, like for example, Google, Amazon, and all these other big organizations like Facebook as well, where there's been talks where they are accused of sharing that information with the state or with the US government, because the US government needs as much information as possible for them to be able to deal with these situations of uncertainty on whether or not a terror attack is going to happen as well. But at the same time, there's also going to be situations where there's also going to be accusations of invasion of privacy. We also know exactly what was brought forth when it comes to the cases of Snowden and the other guy, what's his name? can't remember, those guys who ended up divulging some of the information that was shared by the US government and exactly to what extent they had actually gathered the information as well. So this is basically the reason why they want to do that, is mainly because they want to deal with this situation of uncertainty. And remember, for them to be able to do that, they need to be able to gather as much information as possible. So here they say, to gain reinforced in distinctions between the different components of VUCA, we note that the post 9/11 situation was not necessarily volatile. The core issue facing the world's governments was not a lack of stability or predictability. Rather, government leaders realized that the success of the attacks of the World Trade Center might encourage other terrorists to create similar plots as well. So is there any question regarding the first two letters, volatility and uncertainty? Any questions? The next letter on the acronym is complexity. And here they say, a complex situation is characterized by many interconnected parts. Again, this is distinct from volatile or uncertain situation. So in this case, they say, instead, the most straightforward way for an organization to address complexity is to simplify the situation by adopting a structure that mirrors that of the environment. Research has consistently shown organizations that adapt themselves to match environmental change perform at substantial higher levels, whereas firms that maintain past structures and processes in the face of a changing business environment are less effective. So the most obvious example, as a small informal organization grows, it is expected that the formal departments will appear to address what has become too much of a single person to handle as well. Then here they say, so which means in this case, when they're referring to a small organization, they say, when you look at a small organization, initially, the founder of the organization can be doing all the different activities of the organization. They can be dealing with the sales, they can be running the purchasing department, they can be running the manufacturing department, they can be running all these other functions of the organization as well. But you also find that as the organization grows, the level of complexity of what is going to be involved in all these different departments as well is going to be growing. Hence, to deal with the situation of complexity, that's why you see that you now need to break down your organization into different parts as well, where there's going to be a department dealing with finance, there's going to be a department dealing with operations, there's going to be a department dealing with marketing as well, so that you're able to deal with the increase in complexity as an organization grows as well. So here they say, finance, operations, marketing, and human resources functions are established so that each part of the organization addresses something in which it has an expert. So in this case, in Reed's situation, which is basically the author, says his firm growth into so many new markets creates a complexity that might best be resolved by moving to a more geographically based organizational structure, such that different branches of the company are able to specialize and understand and exploit market regulations and idiosyncrasies as well. So that's how the organization would be able to deal with a situation of complexity. And you also find it as well as an example, going back to the case of ESCOM as well, where the government is now, there's been talks of breaking down of ESCOM into different units as well, mainly because they're saying that there are also arguments that the organization has grown to be too complex, such that it needs to be broken down so that there is easier ways of actually understanding the functions of the different components or units that they're basically looking to break down as well, so that it becomes easier to manage in that way as well, mainly because if as a whole, they are basically saying that the organization has become too complex for them to be able to run as well. So those are some of the arguments that they've put across when it comes to the case study of what? Of Eskom. So is there any question regarding the issue of complexity before we go on to ambiguity? Any questions?
Yes, can you repeat it? The explanation about Eskom, I did not get that point.
So remember, when it comes to the issue of Eskom, right? Remember, there has been talks, although I don't think they've implemented it as yet. There's been talks of breaking down Eskom into different units as well, where one unit is going to be the generation unit, the other one is going to be dealing with different functions as well. So it's mainly because they are acknowledging that the organization has become what? Too complex for them to be able to run. So remember, one way of dealing with complexity is to try to simplify the situation as well. And for them to try to simplify the operations of Eskom, that's why you see that they're trying to break it down into different units as well. Are you with me when it comes to the discussion? It's not a discussion. I don't think it's something that has been implemented as yet, but it's been a discussion as a part of the proposal on exactly how to deal with Eskom going forward as well. Are you with me when it comes to the issue of breaking down of Eskom?
Yes.
So, reason being, remember, they're also acknowledging. So, remember we said, as a typical example, when an organization is too new, right? Like what I said, when an organization is too new, you'll find that the founder of the organization is the one who's saying, okay, fine, I've registered my company today. As I have registered my company today, usually you find that the founder is going to be playing all these different functions in the organization. There will be the finance manager, there will be this purchasing manager, there will be the sales manager, they'll be doing the marketing, they'll be doing the operations, they'll be doing a lot of things as well. But now, as the organization grows, you see that the different functions become more and more complex as well. So which means that as the different functions become more and more complex, that's why you see that they now have, instead of the founder running all these different functions as well, they now start employing people, where they now have a manager running the human resources, they now have a manager running the finance, they now have a manager running the marketing as well, mainly because they're trying to ensure that they're able to deal with the complexity that is involved when an organization grows as well. So which means one way of dealing with complexity is basically what? Trying to simplify the different functions by ensuring that you break it down into separate units where the different individuals within those particular units as well, they're able to specialize so that they're able to get more and more efficiency out of those different functions as well. Are we together? Any questions?
Thank you, sir.
All right. Any other questions? There is also another factor, which is ambiguity. And when you look at ambiguity, they say ambiguity characterizes situations where there is doubt about the nature of cause and effect relationship. So just a lack of understanding as to what will happen next, and that lack of understanding is distinct from uncertainty. In a merely uncertain situation, you have a good idea of what causes what. An ambiguous situation, on the other hand, typically involves around a wholly new product, market, innovation, or opportunity. So an ambiguous situation is more challenging because of the newness. There is little historical precedent for determining the outcomes of a certain cause and or causes of action in that case. So here they say, in the case of ambiguity, we believe the key to success is experimentation, not slack resources, information gathering, or saturation as well. Restructuration. So which means in this case, they say, so which means when you are now faced with a situation where there is ambiguity, they're basically saying that you are facing with, when you're facing a situation of ambiguity, they're basically saying that there is no historical data from which you are going to be able to make your decisions. So there's no historical data from which you're going to be able to make decisions. So since there's no historical data for you to be able to make decisions, it basically means that the best way to deal with a situation of ambiguity is through experimentation, which means you need to spend more on research. That's why you see that especially companies within the IT environment, they're basically breaking boundaries more and more. Like, for example, when it comes to they're basically breaking boundaries because there's more discoveries that are being made, and because there's more discoveries that are being made as well, that's why you see that many companies in IT space, they spend a lot of their money on research and development, because this is basically how they are going to be able to deal with situation of ambiguity, mainly because what they are basically breaking boundaries every now and again. They're making new discoveries, and because technology is constantly progressing and breaking boundaries as well, they're dealing with situations in which there's no statistical data that is currently available as well. And because of that, it basically means that they need to do experimentation by spending more on research and development, which means that for an organization, for them to be able to deal with situations of ambiguity, you need to do experimentation, which means that you need to spend more on what? Research and development as well. So as a final thought, they say globalization has created opportunities with one hand as it has introduced threats with other. So the stubborn global recession has planted repeated bursts of optimism for the return to a path of prosperity. Layer on the challenge of digesting technological advancements that impact industry, as well as the consequences of demographic shifts in the workforce, and there can be little doubt that leaders have their hands full, especially when it comes to dealing with what the situations of what VUCA situations in this case. So these are the cases where they discuss the acronyms of VUCA and exactly what they are and how one can be able to mitigate the scenarios where these situations of VUCA that we are going to be facing as well. So to understand this more, we look at table 1, which looks at the distinctions within the VUCA framework, and they also give an example as well. So they start off with volatility, and what it is, they say relatively unstable change. Information is available and the situation is understandable, but change is frequent and sometimes unpredictable. So as an example of a volatile situation, let's say we look at commodity pricing is often quite volatile. Jet fuel costs, for instance, have been quite volatile in the 21st century. So how to effectively address a situation of volatility? The key to addressing that is through agility. And yet they say agility is key to coping with volatility. So resources should be aggressively directed towards building slack and creating the potential for future flexibility as well. So that's basically how one can be able to deal with a situation of what? Volatility in that case. Then we also look at a situation of uncertainty, and they say this is where there is a lack of knowledge as to whether an event will have meaningful ramifications. Cause and effects are understood, but it is unknown if an event will create significant change. So as an example, anti-terrorism initiatives are generally plagued with uncertainty. We understand many causes of terrorism, but not exactly when and how they can spur attacks as well. So which means when it comes to how to effectively address a situation of uncertainty, they say information is critical to reducing uncertainty. Firms should move beyond existing information sources to both gather new data and consider it from new perspectives as well. So is there any questions so far when it comes to the situations of volatility and uncertainty? Any questions? So potentially in the exam, what you need to be able to take note of is being able to identify and distinguish a situation, for example, of volatility, and know exactly how do we deal with the situation of volatility? And remember here, the key word of dealing with the situation of volatility is agility. And the key word of dealing with the situation of uncertainty is information gathering. Then there is also complexity. And here they say many interconnected parts forming an elaborate network of information and procedures, often multiform and convoluted, but not necessarily involving change. And when it comes to the example, they look at moving into foreign markets is frequently complex. Doing business in new countries often involves navigating a complex web of tariffs, laws, regulations, and logistics issues. So when it comes to how to deal with the situation of complexity, the solution to that would be restructuring internal company operations to match the external complexity is the most effective, efficient way to address it. Firms should attempt to match their own operations and process to mirror environmental complexities as well. Like what they give as an example there when it comes to the issues of complexity. You look typically at an example that is currently serving its market in South Africa. So which means that the moment they now start exporting their goods abroad, or the moment they start setting up subsidiaries in other countries as well, the organization now becoming even more complex to deal with, because remember, over and above the taking into account the local economic conditions, they also have to take into account the foreign economic conditions as well. And they also have to take into account the movements in exchange rate as well, because remember, your exchange rate is also going to significantly affect the return that you're going to be earning on your organization. Look at the case of Barclays Bank as well. Remember, Barclays Bank, they moved into South Africa around 2004, I think 2005, 2006, somewhere there. And then they pulled out of South Africa around 2014, 15. And you will see that since Barclays is originally from the UK as well, you see that around 2004, 2005, the exchange rate, the South African rand was quite strong, where the South African rand was sitting at around, I think around 6, 7, I'm not sure, but it was around 6, 7, 6 or 7 rand to the dollar. But now, when you now move forward to around 2014, 2015, when Barclays started moving out of South Africa as well, the exchange rate was quite, I think it was around 12, 13, 14, somewhere there. So you see that they lost out significantly just from the movements in exchange rate, where they invested, the exchange rate actually lost value as well, which means that, so because of the complexity in the world that you're going to be investing in as well, or because of the complexity in the world that you're going to be operating in as well, it basically means that you need to find out exactly how do you ensure that you are able to restructure your organization to mitigate the effect of the complexity of the organization that you're going to be operating in, especially where you're now going to be seeking to invest in new markets as well. Then there is also the situation of ambiguity, where they say, is there a lack of knowledge as to the basic rules of the game? Cause and effect are not understood, and there is no precedent for making predictions as to what to expect. As an example, the transition from print to digital media has been very ambiguous. Companies are still learning how customers will access and experience data and entertainment given new technologies as well. Then when you look at how to deal with the situation of ambiguity is through experimentation, where they say experimentation is necessary for reducing ambiguity. Only through intelligent experimentation can firm leaders determine what strategies are and are not beneficial in situations where the former rules of business no longer apply as well. So which basically means that you need to consistently spend more on research and development, because the more you spend on research and development, is basically means that this is basically where you're now going to be able to now conduct those experimentations to say, if this is if we take this particular route, then how are we going to be able to ensure that we're able to come out with a better outcome and create a competitive advantage for the organization as well? So the only way to do that is basically through running different experiments where you're running different scenarios to say, if we take this, what is the expected outcome? So which means that with experimentation as well, we are looking at research and development. As part of research and development, we are also not trying to find out exactly. So if we play out, if we start or pursue this particular product as well, how is it going to end up creating a competitive advantage? Is it going to create the value to the firm, or is it going to reduce the value of the firm at the end of the day as well? So that's basically how one can be able to deal with the situation of ambiguity. So these are the 4 letters of the acronym VUCA. So please take note. Remember what I said. It has not yet been asked previously in the exams, but if it comes in the exam, you need to be able to identify a situation of volatility, a situation of uncertainty, a situation of complexity, and a situation of ambiguity as well. And then not only able to identify, you need to find out exactly how would you be able to remedy the situation where you're facing volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity as well. And take note of the keywords: agility, information, restructuring, and experimentation. So these are the keywords that from which you can be using as a basis to be able to mitigate the situations of VUCA as well. So is there any question when it comes to what we covered in Unit 1.6? Any questions? All right. If there are no questions, this is where we're going to end when it comes to Study Unit 1. So now we're done with Study Unit 1. Remember, Study Unit 1, Unit 1.1 to 1.4, yes, go through the articles. I'm not saying don't go through the articles. Please take note. Go through the articles, but don't spend too much, because if you look at Unit 1.1, there's quite a lot of information that I think, yeah, it's quite a lot of pages that you have to go through, because maybe I think it's about 3 or 4 articles where they go in depth in analyzing Eskom as well. Yes, from a real world perspective, you do need to know what is happening with Eskom. It's very, very important from a risk management perspective, so that you're able to apply it in your work environment. But at the same time, for the sake of the exam, don't spend too much of your time going through Unit 1.1 to 1.4. But Unit 1.5, like what I said, there's that section where you need to be able to take note of. And then Unit 1.6, yes, you need to be able to identify the VUCA, the letters of the VUCA acronym, and exactly how to remedy the situations of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity as well. Remember, Study Unit 1, it has not necessarily been brought in the exam specifically coming from Study Unit 1, but 1.5 and 1.6, there are sections which are likely to come, because remember, they can be examinable. And remember, 1.6, like what I said, it can also be applicable to what we're going to be looking at in Study Unit 6 as well. And in Study Unit 2. So Study Unit 2 is very, very important Study Unit, mainly because historically we have seen quite a number of theory questions where they are asking questions coming from Study Unit 2. So Study Unit 2 is quite a very important study unit as well, because we have seen quite a number of questions coming from Study Unit 2. And remember, 1.6, you can be able to relate it in your answers as well, referring to what you've covered in Study Unit 1. Because remember, Study Unit 2, we are basically saying, yes, you need to mitigate the effects of the exogenous shocks on your organization, but at the end of the day, how do you create a competitive advantage? Like what we saw during the pandemic, during the recessions as well, and when world events do happen as well, how do you ensure that you're able to create a competitive advantage and maximize the value of the firm for your organization as well? That's basically what you're going to be looking at in Study Unit 2. And remember, it's also coming in where we're saying that the VUCA acronym as well is also very much relevant, because remember, for you to be able to do that, you are making those decisions in a VUCA world at the end of the day. Are there any questions?
So in your materials, do you have a specific articles? What I'm trying to say is there's lots of articles that is been uploaded by UNISA. Let's say, for example, we use ESCOM article. Can we use one article to narrate to narrate it to the study unit to have a better understanding, or do you have specific material that you can use in your institutions?
Remember, we have to try to stick to the material that is prescribed as the articles that we need to go through for specific study units as well. So we try to avoid deviating from what is being asked to be covered when it comes to the study units. So we don't have other articles that we add on to the study units, because the moment we start bringing in our own information as well, we are afraid that we don't want to have a situation where we are going off the tangent when it comes to addressing the self. Because remember, at the end of the day, whatever we do, we have to go back to the self-assessment questions to say, for each study unit, what needs to be addressed. We try to stick to the articles that have been described as much as possible as well. Are we together? Also, I'm not sure if I've answered here because I couldn't properly hear your questions because I don't know what's happening with the network there. Also, remember what I said, we already have the articles available from study unit 1 to study unit 23. So the articles are already there. So which means that there's no new material that we usually bring in. We try to stick as much as possible to the articles that are being referred to according to the study guide as well. So we try to work through the material according to the study guide so that we go to that material and stick to that material as much as possible as well.
Yes, what I'm trying to say is each unit, maybe let's use one article that is based on that topic, because there's lots of articles.
You are breaking, so I'm struggling to understand the question.
I'm saying, can we use one article each unit? Because there's lots of articles. Let's say unit 1, we deal with the VUCA, we just pick one article by the content. Or can we use, can we use that article to all the study units? Okay.
Please not. You need to go through all the articles that are prescribed for the study. So you need to go through all the articles. Reason being, remember what's happening here. Previously, there was a textbook that was being prescribed, right? But because over time, the textbooks are deemed to be they need to be phased out. That's when they introduce the articles. So you find that each article usually has a specific point that the lecturer is trying to put across for you to understand the overall picture of where we'll be going with the study unit as well. And because of that, there's no article that I would say is not important. So all the articles, you need to go through them. The only articles that I would say don't spend too much of your time on, though, from study unit 1 to study unit 23, all articles are important, but from study unit 1, unit 1.1 to unit 1.4, that's when I said those are the only exceptions where, yes, go through them, but don't dwell too much of your time on them. But all other study units, every article is very, very important, because you will see that if you miss one article, you will see that sometimes the question that they bring in the exam is going to be a theory question where it's basically an answer that is coming from a specific article as well. So every article is very, very important. But for study unit 1 to 1.4, I didn't go through the articles, but don't spend too much of your time on those articles. Are we on the same page now?
Yes.
All right. So from study unit 1 to 1.1 to 1.4, this is where I said, be careful of spending too much time on those articles where we know that they don't necessarily contribute much when it comes to the assignments. They don't contribute much when it comes to the exam. But going forward, every article for the study unit is very, very important. You need to go through it. Mainly because each article there's certain sections that the lecturer is trying to, or there's a point that the lecturer is going through that article to bring up so that you're able to understand a point that the lecturer is trying to bring as well. So which means each article is very, very important going forward as well. Are we together?
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions?
Reynolds, tell me, on the timetable that you have provided, I failed to see the areas that you cover per session. So what I wanted to ask was, is there a way where one can see what the chapters that are going to be discussed are?
All right. What we do is it's very difficult to forecast and say on this particular day, we're going to be covering certain sections as well. Because some sections you might find that people have more questions. Like for now, usually in the previous year, we did the introduction class and we covered unit 1.5 in the first class. Then after that, we covered unit 1.6 and 2.1 in the second class. But in the second class, that's when this year we started with unit 1.5 and 1.6. So it's very difficult for us to say on a particular day in August, this is what we're going to be covering. Because remember, if people have questions, we need to try to address them as much as possible. So whether we end up moving faster or moving slower as well, because if we say on a particular day, this is what we need to cover, it basically means that we're going to be having a situation where we're trying to move to cover the concept so that we keep up, but at the same time, people wouldn't understand as well. So to try to balance between people asking questions and moving fast, we just have certain days. You will see that even if we end up having a situation where sessions, people are asking questions, I would encourage that because it means people understand as well. Even if we move slower, it's better for us to even create more sessions as long as we ensure that by end of October we are done. So which means that even as we go through the different study units as well, even if we end up having a situation where we just cover a small portion of a section because people are asking questions, it basically means that it's fine. We can still move slower. We can even create more sessions as well, as long as we're able to see that. So on what we do as well is that we use the what was where we were previously in the previous year as a benchmark of exactly how far are we in progressing with our curriculum as well. So that's basically what we use as a benchmark. So which means that if we realize we're a bit slower, that's when we can create more sessions as well. But we are not able to say on a particular day, this is basically what we're going to be covering. But for you to be able to know exactly roughly what is going to be covered there as well, we try as much as possible to have you have videos available. Like now, what we've done this year is that as you are starting now, we have made available videos going through study unit 2 and study unit 3 already available in advance. So which means if you want to be able to study in advance, the videos for your study unit 2 and study unit 3 that were done in year 2022 and year 2021 as well, the videos are already there. So you can utilize them to prepare for the coming classes. Are we on the same page?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So it's very difficult for us to say on the 14th of August, for example, we're going to be doing study unit 11. What happens if people are asking questions and on the 14th of August, we are only on study unit 9? It means that we are not going to be able to, we still have to be able now to change the timetable as well. So we try encourage as much as possible for people to ask questions during the classes. So which means that even if we move slower, it's still fine. As long as we ensure that even if we move slower, it's still fine. We can even go on and create more sessions as long as people are able to understand the material. Because if you're able to understand the material, it means you're better equipped to pass the exam as well. Are there any other questions? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the link to the video for the previous class that we did. Reason being, it will give you instructions on exactly how to create a user account on our website. Because remember, if you're able to create a user account on our website and you tell us that I've used this email and these are the modules that I need to be linked, it means that even before you pay anything, even before you officially register with us as well, you are able to go through that material in advance. and you're able to benefit from that material. Because remember, and between now until the 31st of March, we are making our website freely available to everyone. Although we have limited how much material you're able to access on the website as well, but we are making that material available, which means that anything that you need between Start Unit 1 to Start Unit 3, it's freely available. All the videos are there, all the articles are there as well. So which means that you're able to use that material to prepare, and you're able to see to use that material as you're studying as well. So please feel free to create the user account. But for you to be able to do that, please go over the study unit where the video of the class that we did for the induction class. Because when you did the induction class, we went through the overview of the module. We also gave you shared the screen where we show you how to create the user account on our website, where we show you how to download the articles, how to access the videos as well. We did that in class. So please make sure that you go through that, because the induction is basically very, very important, so that you know what information you have available and where to get them as well. All right, if there are no questions, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Please make sure that you're able to create the user account so that you're able to benefit from the material that you've made available freely to students between now until the 31st of March. Yes?
For the next class, are you going to send a different link, or should we stay on the one that starts at 11?
It's a different link. It's a different link. Remember, each class has its own link as well. And I shared those links on the different WhatsApp groups. If you don't have it, send me a WhatsApp message directly. I'll be able to send it to you.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.